What if the life you have been praying for has never once been out of reach? What if the distance between where you are standing right now and the abundant, peaceful, joy-filled existence you can feel in your bones was never measured in years of hard work, never measured in the accumulation of the right circumstances, never dependent on someone finally seeing your worth or the economy finally turning in your favor? What if that distance, that entire vast aching gap between the life you are living and the life you know you were made for, was measured only in words, not in grand speeches, not in perfectly memorized affirmations recited with forced enthusiasm in front of a bathroom mirror, but in the quiet, ordinary, unremarkable words you speak without thinking 100 times before noon? The words you mutter under your breath while stuck in traffic. The words you type into a message to your closest friend. The words that run on a loop in the back of your mind while you are trying to fall asleep and your chest feels tight with a worry you cannot even fully name. Those words. Those small, casual, seemingly harmless words are building something. They have always been building something. And by the time we reach the end of this together, you will never hear yourself speak the same way again. The great mystic and spiritual teacher Florence Scovel Shinn walked this earth in the early part of the 20th century, and she left behind a body of work so precise, so luminous, so quietly radical that the world is still catching up to what she understood. She was not a theorist. She was a practitioner. She worked directly with people whose lives had become tangled in knots of poverty, illness, broken relationships, and despair. And she watched those lives transform, not through the intervention of lucky circumstance, but through the deliberate, disciplined, loving redirection of spoken words. She taught that the spoken word is the most powerful creative instrument available to a human soul, not because of any mystical or superstitious reason, but because of a law as reliable and impersonal as gravity. A law that does not care about your past, does not weigh your mistakes, does not measure your worthiness, and cannot be bargained with or manipulated. A law that simply, faithfully, relentlessly delivers into your physical experience the precise, energetic equivalent of whatever you most consistently speak and feel and believe to be true. She called it the game of life, and she meant that word deliberately, because a game has rules. And once you understand the rules, once you really understand them not just intellectually but in the marrow of your bones, you stop being a helpless player tossed around by forces you cannot see, and you become something else entirely. You become the one who plays with intention, the one who moves with purpose, the one who speaks with the quiet confidence of someone who has finally remembered that the power was never outside of them. Now, before we go any further, I want to speak directly to something you may be feeling in this moment, because I know there is a version of you listening to these words right now that is tired. Not just physically tired, though perhaps that too, but spiritually tired. The kind of tired that comes from hoping for a long time and watching that hope go unfulfilled. The kind of tired that makes a person start to wonder, quietly, in the dark hours, whether they are simply not one of the ones this works for. Whether there is something fundamentally different about the people whose lives seem to flow easily and naturally toward beauty and abundance, and the people who seem to press their face against that glass from the outside, working harder, praying longer, trying more sincerely, and still finding themselves in the same place when the calendar turns. I want you to hear me when I say this. That tiredness is not evidence that you are beyond the reach of this law. It is not proof that you are broken or cursed or less than. That tiredness is simply what happens when a powerful creator has been unknowingly using their creative force in the wrong direction for a very long time. You have not been failing. You have been succeeding at the wrong instructions. And that, beloved, is the most hopeful thing I can possibly tell you, because what has been done unconsciously can be undone consciously. What has been spoken in ignorance can be re-spoken in wisdom. The instrument has never been broken. Only the song has been wrong. Let us begin at the very beginning. Let us begin with what is actually happening when you open your mouth and speak. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote that your word is your wand. She was not being poetic. She was being precise. In every spiritual tradition that has ever existed on this earth, across every culture and every century, there is this singular, persistent understanding that the spoken word carries a creative charge, that the universe itself was spoken into being, that in the beginning there was the word, that sound and vibration are not merely the byproduct of reality, but its very foundation. Modern physics has circled around to something remarkably close to what these ancient teachers knew, that at the most fundamental level, everything that appears solid and fixed and unchangeable is not solid at all. It is vibration, it is frequency, it is energy in a state of constant motion and constant responsiveness. And nothing you possess, no tool, no technology, no resource of any kind, carries a more immediate or more potent vibrational signal than your own voice, your own words, your own declarations about yourself and your world. Your subconscious mind, that vast and faithful inner servant that Florence Scovel Shinn wrote about with such tenderness and such clarity, is listening to every word you speak, every single one. It does not have an off switch. It does not take a day off. It does not distinguish between the words you say jokingly and the words you say sincerely. It does not understand sarcasm. It does not register the longing buried beneath your complaint or the hope hiding inside your fear. It receives only the literal content of what you speak with feeling, and it treats each declaration as an instruction, as a blueprint, as a direct command from the conscious self about what kind of reality to construct. And then it gets to work. Quietly, tirelessly, invisibly, it begins arranging the subtle architecture of your experience to match the instructions it has been given. It draws certain opportunities toward you and filters others out. It shapes the lens through which you perceive your circumstances. It influences the words that come out of your mouth in conversation, which then influence how others respond to you, which then influences the physical circumstances of your days. It is a system of breathtaking intricacy and breathtaking obedience, and you are the one giving it its orders every time you open your mouth. This is not punishment. I want to be very clear about that, because there is a way this truth can land that feels crushing, that feels like one more thing to feel guilty about, one more way you have been doing everything wrong. That is not the spirit in which it is offered. Florence Scovel Shinn never spoke of this law with severity or judgment. She spoke of it with the gentle practicality of someone who has understood that a law is simply a law. Gravity does not punish you for dropping something, it simply operates. The law of the spoken word does not punish you for the unconscious complaints and declarations of limitation that have been pouring out of you for years. It simply operates. It has been honoring your words all along. It has been saying yes to every instruction you have issued. And the moment you begin to issue different instructions, it will say yes to those with the same faithful consistency. This is the mercy hidden inside the law. It does not hold a grudge. It does not require you to first repay a debt of old negative speaking before the new words can take effect. It is always, only, responding to what is being declared right now, in this moment, in the next moment, and in the moment after that. So let us talk about what has actually been happening. Let us look with clear and compassionate eyes at the language most of us were taught, the language most of us inherited without ever being asked if we wanted it. Because the words we speak are not entirely our own invention. They are the words we heard growing up. They are the words our parents spoke about money, about struggle, about what was possible for people like us. They are the words of our culture, our community, our economic reality as we understood it. They are words passed down through generations, encoded in the very syntax of how we describe a difficult day, or a financial pressure, or a relationship that isn't working. And most of those words, the ones that got passed down with the most consistency and the most emotional charge, were words of limitation, words of lack, words of worry. Words that described a world in which resources were scarce and security was fragile, and the future was something to be feared rather than something to be claimed. I am talking about the sentences that come out of your mouth so automatically you barely notice them. Things like, money doesn't grow on trees. Things like, I could never afford something like that. Things like, good things don't last. Things like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Things like, nothing ever works out for me. Things like, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. These are not just words. They are vibrational instructions. And your subconscious mind, your faithful inner servant, has been receiving them as gospel, has been taking each one and using it as raw material to construct the experience that matches. And here you have been, wondering why the same patterns keep repeating. Wondering why abundance seems to come close and then slip away. Wondering why you work so hard and still feel like you are barely keeping your head above the water. It is not because the universe has abandoned you. It is not because you are unlucky or cursed or fundamentally undeserving. It is because the instructions have been consistently pointing in one direction, and the law has been consistently delivering what the instructions called for, and the whole system has been operating with a kind of terrible perfection that would be almost admirable if it weren't so painful. But here is the turn. Here is the place where everything changes. Here is the moment Florence Scovel Shinn always arrived at in her work with people. The moment of recognition. The moment the client sitting across from her suddenly felt the shift in their chest as they understood that they were not a victim of their circumstances, but the author of them. That the power they had been handing over to the outer world, to the economy, to other people, to luck, to fate, had never actually left them. That it had been in their own mouth this whole time. That their voice, the voice they used to complain, to worry, to declare defeat before the battle had even begun, was the same voice that could declare victory, could declare abundance, could declare healing and restoration and open doors and divine appointment and miraculous turnaround. The same instrument, the same power, a completely different song. And the most extraordinary thing about this, the thing that still takes my breath away when I sit with it, is that you do not have to be perfect to begin. You do not have to have resolved every doubt. You do not have to have fully silenced the old voice before the new one can start to take effect. Florence Scovel Shinn was clear on this. The law is activated not by perfect faith, but by direction. Not by the complete absence of fear, but by the consistent choice to speak from a place that is higher than the fear. It is a practice. It is a muscle. It is a language being learned. And, like every language, it begins with stumbling and awkwardness and the persistent sensation that you are somehow getting it wrong. And like every language, with gentle, consistent practice, it becomes fluent. It becomes natural. It becomes the way you move through the world. And as it does, the world around you will begin, subtly at first, and then unmistakably, to rearrange itself in response. There is a story Florence Scovel Shinn told that I want you to hold in your mind as we go deeper into this together. It is a story about a woman who came to her in a state of complete financial desperation. This woman had nothing left in any material sense. The rent was due. The cupboards were nearly bare. Every door she had knocked on had closed. Every avenue she had pursued had led nowhere. And she sat across from Florence with the particular hollowness of someone who has prayed and hoped and waited and found nothing but silence on the other side. And Florence asked her one question. She asked her what she had been saying, not what she had been thinking, not what she had been feeling, but what she had been saying, out loud. To herself, to her friends, to the walls of her apartment in the quiet moments when nobody was listening. And the woman paused, and then she began to speak. And what came out was a perfect, detailed, emotionally charged portrait of lack. She had been saying there was no way out. She had been saying that nothing ever changed for her. She had been saying that she was always at the bottom and always would be. She had been saying these things so many times and with such consistent feeling that they had become something more than complaints. They had become her identity. They had become the frequency she was broadcasting. And the universe, that impersonal and faithful responder, had been matching that frequency with breathtaking precision. Florence did not judge her. She did not tell her she had brought this upon herself in any spirit of blame. She simply helped her see the mechanism. She helped her understand that the same mouth that had been speaking a world of lack into being was entirely capable of speaking a world of supply into being, that the instrument had not failed, that the creative power was still fully intact. And then she helped her begin to speak differently, not in wild, desperate declarations that felt completely disconnected from reality, but in small, genuine, carefully chosen words that opened a crack of possibility in the wall of impossibility she had been constructing. And that crack, that small, honest opening, was enough for the light to begin coming through. I tell you this story not because I want you to simply take it on faith, but because I want you to understand the architecture of what we are about to build together. Because there is a way of approaching this work that is too large and too forced and too disconnected from where you actually are, and it produces nothing except a deeper sense of failure when the grand declarations fail to immediately manifest the grand results. And there is another way. A way that is rooted in the genuine, that begins with what is actually true and uses that truth as a foundation to gently, honestly, powerfully build toward a larger truth. This is the way Florence Scovel Shinn always worked: precise, grounded, deeply respectful of where the person was, while absolutely refusing to accept that where they were was where they had to stay. So let us now go into the deeper layers of this teaching. Let us talk about what is actually happening in your body when you speak words of limitation versus words of power. Because this is not only a spiritual principle, it is a physiological reality. When you speak words of fear and lack and defeat, your nervous system responds. Your body, that magnificent and sensitive instrument, registers the emotional content of every word you speak as if it were a direct report on the state of your external reality. It does not distinguish between a real threat and a spoken description of a feared possibility. When you say, "I am so stressed about money," your body responds to the word stressed with a cascade of physiological changes designed to help you survive a crisis. Cortisol rises, the muscles tighten. The breath becomes shallow. The creative, solution-finding parts of the brain begin to go offline as the survival mechanisms take over. And here is the devastating irony. The very physiological state produced by speaking words of financial stress is the state least capable of generating the creative insight, the confident action, the magnetic presence that would actually attract and create financial solutions. You speak the words of the problem, and your body becomes chemically incapable of finding the answer. The words and the biology create a loop that endlessly reinforces itself. But the inverse is also true. When you speak words of peace, of sufficiency, of trust, of possibility, your nervous system responds to those as well. The breath deepens, the muscles soften, the creative faculties come back online. The parts of your brain responsible for pattern recognition, for inspired action, for genuine human connection, for the kind of warm, confident energy that draws people and opportunities toward you, those parts begin to function again. Your entire being becomes a different instrument, broadcasting a different frequency, attracting a different quality of experience. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this not in the neurological vocabulary we have available today, but in something deeper and more direct than vocabulary. She understood it from watching human beings transform in real time as they changed the words they spoke. She had seen enough of it that the law was not theoretical for her. It was as obvious and as observable as the law that causes water to flow downhill. Now, I want to speak to you about something that most teachings in this space skip over too quickly, and I think it is the reason so many people try this work, feel a brief flicker of hope, and then abandon it when the results do not come as immediately and dramatically as they expected. I want to talk to you about the gap. The gap is the period between when you begin speaking new words and when you begin seeing new results in your physical circumstances. And in that gap, almost everyone experiences the same thing. The old reality does not immediately dissolve. The bank account does not instantly fill. The relationship does not immediately mend. The body does not immediately heal. The circumstances look exactly as they looked yesterday. Sometimes, maddeningly, they look worse. And the mind, that logical, evidence-gathering, pattern-completing machine, points to the unchanged circumstances and says with great authority, "You see, I told you. This doesn't work. Nothing is changing. You are fooling yourself. Go back to the old way. At least the old way is honest." This is the moment that everything depends on. This is the moment Florence Scovel Shinn prepared her students for with such care. Because the ones who understand what the gap actually is can navigate it with grace. And the ones who do not understand it will almost always abandon the practice just before it bears fruit, the way a farmer might dig up a seed the day before it was about to break through the soil. Because the ground above it still looked unchanged. The gap is not evidence that the law is not working. The gap is the law working. In the invisible realm, in the energetic dimension where all physical experience is first assembled, the shift is already happening. The new instructions are already being processed. The new blueprint is already being built. What you are experiencing as unchanged external circumstances is simply the time it takes for the invisible to become visible, for the energetic to become physical. Florence Scovel Shinn compared it to a seed planted in the earth. The farmer does not plant the seed and then stand over the ground demanding to know why a tree has not yet appeared. The farmer plants with confidence and then goes about the work of living, trusting the law that governs growth to do what it does in the time it takes. The planting is the speaking. The watering is the consistent repetition of the new words. The sunlight is the genuine feeling infused into those words. And the harvest will come. Not because you forced it, but because you cooperated with a law that cannot fail. But here I must add something important, something Florence Scovel Shinn was very clear about, and that is often glossed over in favor of the more comfortable parts of this teaching. The new words must be accompanied by the willingness to take the action that presents itself. She was not teaching passive wishing, she was teaching active co-creation. The spoken word opens the door, but you must be willing to walk through it when it opens. This means staying alert for the nudge, the unexpected phone call, the article you stumble across that points you towards something you had not considered, the chance meeting with someone who turns out to hold a key. These are not coincidences. These are the law responding to your new instructions. These are the open doors, but they require you to act. They require you to follow the thread. They require the courage to take a step even when the full staircase is not yet visible. Florence Scovel Shinn spoke often of divine leads. The inner prompting that suddenly moves you to reach out to a particular person, to take a particular route, to say yes to an invitation you might otherwise have declined. When you are speaking words of trust and possibility and divine guidance, these leads become clearer. They become more frequent. They become easier to distinguish from the noise of anxious mental chatter. And as you follow them, as you act on them with even a little bit of trust, you will begin to see the confirmation that the new blueprint is being built. You will begin to see the small synchronicities, the unexpected openings, the doors that swing wide in places you had stopped expecting to find them. Now let us talk about the particular nature of money, because money is the area where this law is most visibly and dramatically misunderstood, and where the inherited language of limitation runs deepest and most quietly in most people's bloodstreams. Florence Scovel Shinn devoted significant attention to this in her work, because she saw so many people living in genuine material suffering, not because they lacked ability or willingness or even effort, but because their relationship with money at the level of language and belief was one of profound enmity. They feared money. They resented money. They simultaneously desperately wanted money and deeply believed themselves unworthy of it. And this contradictory energetic signal, this wanting while fearing, this reaching while believing oneself undeserving, produced a kind of static in the creative channel that made consistent abundance nearly impossible to land. The language of this enmity is very specific and very common. It sounds like money is the root of all evil. It sounds like rich people are greedy. It sounds like I am not the kind of person who has financial abundance. It sounds like every time I get ahead, something comes along and wipes it out. It sounds like money just flows through my hands like water. And here is the thing. Every single one of these phrases, spoken with feeling, spoken repeatedly, becomes a decree, becomes a command, becomes an instruction to the subconscious mind, and through it to the creative law that governs all experience. When you say money flows through my hands like water, you are not describing a pattern. You are perpetuating one. You are issuing the instruction to continue ensuring that money does not stay. When you say every time I get ahead something comes along and wipes it out, you are not observing a cruel tendency of fate. You are creating the mold into which fate will continue to pour your experience. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that there is an infinite invisible supply, a substance she sometimes called the mother lode, an inexhaustible source of divine substance that underlies all visible material reality and is perfectly capable of flowing into any form, including the form of the money, the opportunity, the resource that is needed. This supply is not rationed. It is not reserved for certain people. It flows in response to consciousness. It flows toward those who have opened the channel through their words and their beliefs and their willingness to receive. And the channel is opened not by being perfect, not by having always spoken wisely, not by having never made a financial mistake, but simply and directly by beginning to speak about money differently, by beginning to treat it not as an enemy or a scarce resource being fought over by too many people, but as a form of divine supply responding to invitation. This does not mean pretending you are wealthy when you are not. It does not mean lying to yourself or to the universe about the present condition of your bank account. What it means, what Florence Scovel Shinn meant when she talked about speaking the word of abundance, is that you begin to shift the underlying story. You begin to move from the story that says there is not enough and I am not enough and there never will be enough, to a story that says supply is seeking me, channels are opening. The right resources reach me at exactly the right time. I am a generous and worthy receiver of divine abundance. These are not lies, these are not delusions. These are the planting of a new seed in the soil of your subconscious mind. A seed that, watered with consistency and genuine feeling, will break through the hard ground of the old pattern and grow into something real and visible and deeply satisfying. And there is something else Florence Scovel Shinn taught about money that is perhaps the most counterintuitive and the most powerful aspect of this entire dimension of the work. She taught the power of giving. Not giving from a place of obligation or guilt, not giving strategically as a way of trying to trick the universe into giving back, but giving from a genuine inner freedom. From the conscious decision to treat your current supply, however modest, as evidence of abundance rather than evidence of lack. She told the story of a woman in dire financial straits who had only a small amount of money left and who, at Florence's encouragement, gave a portion of it away, not recklessly, but freely and joyfully. And she did it while speaking the words of divine supply, while declaring that her giving was evidence of her trust in the inexhaustible source. And the floodgates opened, not magically, not instantaneously, but with the quiet, decisive momentum of a law being correctly applied? Because the act of giving from a place of trust, rather than hoarding from a place of fear, sent a signal more powerful than any affirmation spoken from behind clenched fists. It said, at the level of embodied action, I believe there is more. I am not operating from scarcity. I am operating from the knowledge of a supply that does not run dry. There is a dimension of this teaching that Florence Scovel Shinn returned to again and again with a kind of quiet insistence, as though she knew it was the piece most likely to be skipped over, most likely to be filed away as nice in theory, but not quite practical when the pressure is on. It is the dimension of relationships, of the words we speak, not just about money and circumstance, but about the people in our lives, the words we speak about our partners, our children, our parents, our colleagues, our friends, our enemies. Because here, perhaps more than anywhere else, the law of the spoken word operates with a precision and a swiftness that can be either devastating or beautiful, depending on the direction in which you have been pointing your words. Think for a moment about how you speak about the difficult person in your life, the one who frustrates you, the one who has hurt you, The one whose behavior has become such a familiar source of pain that describing that pain has become almost a ritual. You meet a friend for coffee, and within the first 10 minutes, the conversation has turned to what they did this time. You lie in bed at night replaying the conversation that went wrong. You compose, in the quiet of your own mind, the perfectly articulate explanation of exactly how impossible this person is, and how justified your frustration is, and how exhausting it is to deal with someone who simply will not change. And every single word of that replay, every single sentence of that mental composition, is an instruction, is a decree, is a command issued to the faithful law that governs your experience. And the instruction is this: keep delivering to me more evidence of exactly this behavior. Keep arranging my reality so that this person continues to appear to me as impossible, as hurtful, as exhausting, as unchangeable. Because that is what I am declaring. That is what I am saying is true. Florence Scovel Shinn saw this pattern with extraordinary clarity. She worked with countless people who came to her not about money but about people, about the husband who had grown cold and distant, about the business partner who had become untrustworthy, about the mother whose criticism never seemed to stop, about the friend who had betrayed them. And in every case, she would gently direct attention to the words being spoken about these people. Because she had observed, over and over again, that the moment a person changed the words they were speaking about another, the other person began to change. Not because the words magically altered the other person's free will, but because the one who was speaking was altering the energetic field between them, was altering their own perception of the other, which altered their own behavior toward the other, which altered the dynamic between them, which created space for the other person to show up differently. The transformation in the outer relationship always began with a transformation in the inner language about that relationship. This is one of the most practically powerful applications of everything Florence Scovel Shinn ever taught, and it is one of the most challenging. Because there is something in the human heart that wants to be right about the difficult person, wants to maintain the accurate accounting of all the ways they have failed us, wants the record of their wrongdoing to be clearly and consistently stated, as though the stating of it is somehow protecting us from it. But Florence would ask you to consider what protection is actually being provided. When you consistently declare that someone in your life is impossible, you are not protecting yourself from their impossibility. You are guaranteeing it. You are building the mold into which their behavior toward you will continue to be poured. The very act of speaking their limitation is the act of perpetuating it in your experience of them. She taught instead a practice that requires genuine spiritual courage. The practice of speaking the truth of the divine identity of every person in your life, especially the difficult ones. Not to deny what has happened, not to paper over genuine harm with pretty words, but to consciously choose to address, through your spoken words, the highest aspect of another person, rather than the lowest. To say, even when the evidence in front of you is suggesting otherwise, there is a divine self in this person. There is goodness in this person that I may not currently be able to see, but that the law of divine love is perfectly capable of bringing to the surface. I release my need to hold them in the prison of my worst perception of them. I speak only of what I want to see made real between us. This is not weakness. It is not naivety. It is not the abandonment of your own dignity or the pretending away of genuine harm. It is the recognition that your spoken words are the brushes with which you paint your experience, and that you have the sovereign power to choose what you paint. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote about what she called the divine design for every relationship. The idea that beneath the surface noise of every difficult dynamic, there is a perfect possibility waiting to be spoken into being. And that the speaking, the consistent, genuine, spiritually grounded declaration of that perfect possibility is what draws it from the invisible into the visible. I want to tell you about another pattern she observed, one that is perhaps even more insidious than the obvious complaints and the loud declarations of defeat. Because it hides in the clothing of something that looks like wisdom, it is the pattern of anxious anticipation, the pre-suffering. The practice of describing, in vivid and emotionally charged detail, the terrible thing that might happen. I just know this is going to fall apart. I have a feeling something is going to go wrong. Knowing my luck, just when things start to look up, something will come along and ruin it. Every one of these statements is a spoken decree. Every one of them is an instruction. And the law, that faithful and impersonal servant of your declarations, does not register the anxiety with which they are spoken as a reason to withhold delivery. It registers the content. It receives the image you have painted with your words. It receives the future you have described. And it begins arranging the circumstances of your life to match that description. Florence Scovel Shinn had a specific remedy for this pattern, and it was brilliantly simple. She taught that every time you catch yourself beginning to speak a feared future into existence, you replace it immediately with what she called the divine selection. You do not simply silence the fearful prediction. You actively replace it with a declaration of divine right outcome. Instead of, I just know this is going to fall through, you speak, this, or something better, is now made manifest in perfect divine order under grace. Instead of something is going to go wrong, you declare, divine intelligence is in charge of this situation, and the outcome is perfect, harmonious, and for the highest good of everyone involved. These were not phrases Florence invented out of pleasantness. They were precise, spiritual tools, crafted to do a specific job. The job of interrupting the creative cycle of the feared outcome and replacing it with the creative cycle of the trusted one. She had watched these phrases produce results that her logical mind would have struggled to predict. Deals that had fallen through were revived. Estrangements that had seemed permanent were healed. Situations that had appeared to be closing down suddenly and inexplicably opened up, not because magic was performed, but because the law was correctly applied. Now I want to go into something that is at once the most simple and the most profound aspect of everything Florence Scovel Shinn taught. Something that underlies all three of the sacred phrases we are working with. Something without which the most beautifully constructed declaration will remain a collection of pretty words without creative power. I want to talk about feeling. About the emotional substance that must be married to the spoken word, if that word is to carry real creative charge. Florence Scovel Shinn described this as the difference between a decree and a wish. A wish is a word spoken from the surface of the mind, from the thinking layer, from the place that understands the concept and can arrange it into a grammatically correct sentence. A decree is a word spoken from the depth of the being, from the place where knowing lives rather than hoping, from the place where the feeling of the thing is already real, even before the physical evidence has appeared. The subconscious mind, that powerful servant we have been speaking of throughout this entire exploration, does not respond to logic. It does not respond to the intellectual understanding that it would be good if this were true. It responds to feeling. It responds to the emotional signal that accompanies the words. This is why you can repeat an affirmation 100 times without producing any result if you are speaking it from a place of disconnection, from a place of going through the motions, from a place that is secretly saying these words while simultaneously believing them to be false. The words without the feeling are seeds without soil. They have no place to take root. They make no impression on the creative medium of the subconscious mind. They are, in the most literal sense, empty words. But here is the grace in this, because I know that what I have just said could land as one more impossible standard, one more way in which you are not doing it right. One more reason to feel that this works for other people, but will probably not work for you. The grace is this: you do not need to manufacture a feeling you do not have. You do not need to perform an emotional state that is not genuine. What you need to do is find the nearest available genuine feeling that is one step in the direction of where you want to go. If you are in a place of genuine despair and you are being asked to feel abundant, the gap between those two states is too large to leap in one jump. Florence Scovel Shinn knew this. She never asked her clients to pretend their way to a feeling. She asked them to find the feeling that was genuinely available to them right now, that was slightly freer, slightly more open, slightly more trusting than the one they had been living in. Maybe you cannot feel abundantly wealthy right now, but can you feel grateful, for the warmth of the room you are sitting in? Can you feel a flicker of appreciation for the fact that you are here and breathing and still in the game? Can you find, somewhere in your chest, even the smallest genuine ember of hope that things could change? That feeling, however small, however humble, is the soil. That feeling, married to a simple, honest word, is enough to begin. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn's approach was never about grand performances of faith. It was about genuine incremental movement. One true feeling at a time. One honest word at a time. Building from the foundation of what is real, upward toward the vision of what is possible. And as the words begin to accumulate, and the feelings begin to strengthen, and the small confirmations begin to appear in the outer world, something happens in the inner world that is perhaps the most important transformation of all. The relationship between the self and the creative law begins to shift. It moves from the tentative, uncertain, hoping it might work relationship of someone trying something new to the quiet, confident, grounded relationship of someone who has seen the law operate enough times that doubt begins to lose its grip. You develop what Florence Scovel Shinn called spiritual understanding, the knowing that goes beyond belief because it has been confirmed by lived experience. And from that place, the words you speak carry a weight and a charge and a creative power that the early stumbling declarations simply could not have. Because behind them is not just the concept of trust, but the lived experience of trust confirmed. Let us now speak about the words we direct, not at circumstances, but at time itself, because one of the most consistently spoken languages of limitation is the language of chronological imprisonment. The belief that because something has been a certain way for a long time, it is therefore going to continue being that way. The assumption that the past is a reliable predictor of the future. Florence Scovel Shinn had no patience with this particular form of resignation. Not because she was dismissive of genuine suffering, or the very real weight of repeated disappointment, but because she had seen too many times the way a single shift in spoken word could collapse an entire structure of years-long limitation in what seemed like an instant. She had a phrase she returned to often. She would say that with God, which she understood as the infinite creative intelligence underlying all existence, time is not a factor. She meant this precisely. She meant that the law that governs creation is not subject to the slow grinding logic of historical causation. It does not look at how long a thing has been a certain way and calculate how long it will take to change. It responds to the present instruction. It responds to what is being declared now, and now, and now. A person who has been broke for 20 years can speak a new word today and find that the channels of supply begin opening in ways that have nothing to do with those 20 years. A relationship that has been cold and painful for a decade can shift within weeks when the words spoken about it and within it begin to change. A body that has been struggling for years can begin to respond to new declarations about its divine wholeness and its capacity for healing. This does not mean the change will always be instantaneous. Florence Scovel Shinn was honest about the fact that sometimes the harvest takes longer than we would like. But she was equally insistent that the length of time a problem has existed is not a measure of how long it will take to dissolve, because the problem was never as solid as it appeared. It was always a frequency, always a pattern, always a set of spoken instructions being faithfully fulfilled. And the moment the instructions change, the pattern has no choice but to begin changing with them. The ground is already shifting beneath the surface. The seed has already been planted. The question is only whether you will have the patience and the faith to keep speaking the new word until the visible catches up with the invisible. And so, here we arrive at the territory that Florence Scovel Shinn perhaps held most sacred of all. The territory of divine timing. The understanding that there is an intelligence at work in the architecture of your unfolding that is more precise and more loving and more comprehensive than your own best planning. She taught that when you speak your word and release it in trust, when you declare the outcome you are claiming and then hold it lightly, rather than gripping it with the white-knuckled anxiety of someone who cannot bear to be disappointed again. You create the conditions for something to arrive that is not just what you asked for, but what you could not have known to ask for. The divine selection. The perfect right thing. The outcome that, when it arrives, you recognize not as the thing you specified, but as something better. Something that could only have been arranged by an intelligence that could see further down the road than you could. This is perhaps the most mature expression of everything we are exploring here. The movement from trying to control the specific form of the answer to trusting the source of all answers. From demanding a particular door to open to declaring that the right door is opening now and trusting the law to show you which one it is. Florence Scovel Shinn had a prayer she used often in her work with people that captures this perfectly. She would pray not for a specific outcome, but for the divine right outcome. She would declare, not this specific job, or this specific amount of money, or this specific relationship, but my divine supply now comes to me through the right channels by divine right, under grace in perfect ways. She understood that the infinite creative intelligence could arrange a delivery more elegant and more precisely fitted to the true need than any delivery her own mind could have designed. And she had seen enough of those deliveries to trust the process with a confidence that was neither passive nor naive, but deeply, practically, experientially grounded. We have traveled a long and luminous road together in this conversation. We have looked honestly at the mechanism by which your words have been creating your experience. We have sat with the uncomfortable recognition of how long and how consistently the language of limitation has been running in the background of your life like a program you never consciously installed. We have explored the deep territory of money and relationships and time and feeling and the gap between the invisible shift and the visible result. And now I want to bring all of it together. I want to hand you the complete picture. The full, living, breathing practice that Florence Scovel Shinn offered, not as a theory to be admired, but as a tool to be used. Starting today, starting with the very next words that come out of your mouth. Because here is what I know about you. I know that you did not find your way to this teaching by accident. There are no accidents in the economy of a universe governed by law. You are here because something in you is ready. Something in you has been quietly knowing for a long time that the story you have been living is not the whole story. That somewhere beneath the accumulated weight of disappointment and deferred hope and the sensible resignation of someone who has been hurt enough times to stop expecting too much, there is a self that knows better. A self that remembers something about its own nature that the noise of daily struggle has temporarily drowned out. A self that knows it was not born to scrape and strain and worry and wonder. A self that knows, with a certainty that goes deeper than logic, that it was born for more. That self has been trying to speak to you. And today, in this moment, you are finally listening. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote something in her first and most celebrated book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, that I want to offer you now, as the foundation of everything we are about to close with. She wrote that the invisible forces are ever working for the man who is always expecting the best. Read those words again, and let them land in your body rather than just your mind. The invisible forces are ever working. Not occasionally working. Not working when you have earned it. Not working when you have sufficiently proven your worthiness or maintained a sufficiently high vibrational state for a sufficiently long period of time. Ever working. Always. Ceaselessly. The machinery of divine creation is always in motion, always responsive, always available. The only question is what you are directing it toward. And the answer to that question is found in the words you are speaking and the expectations you are holding. For the man who is always expecting the best, not the man who has finally convinced himself through great effort to pretend that the best is coming, but the one who has genuinely, through practice and through the accumulation of spiritual evidence, arrived at a place of natural expectancy, a place where the best outcome is simply what is assumed, where abundance is simply the expected weather, where the right door opening is simply what is anticipated rather than desperately hoped for. This is the destination, and the road to it is exactly what we have been mapping throughout this entire exploration. It is walked one word at a time, one gentle correction at a time, one honest feeling at a time, one small confirmation noticed and appreciated at a time. Let me now give you the complete, daily practice. The living structure that will carry this teaching from the realm of beautiful idea into the realm of actual embodied transformation. Because Florence Scovel Shinn was always practical, she was always specific. She never left her students with only inspiration. She left them with instruction. And so, I will do the same. The practice begins the moment you wake up, before you reach for your phone, before you let the day's agenda rush in with its list of demands and anxieties, before you give the outer world the first word of your morning. In those first soft moments of waking, when your conscious mind is still gentle and permeable, when the great gatekeeper of your doubts has not yet fully assumed its post, you have a window. A sacred window of perhaps 30 seconds or 2 minutes, during which the subconscious mind is maximally receptive to new instruction. Florence Scovel Shinn knew this. The ancient mystics knew this. And modern neuroscience, in its own vocabulary, has confirmed it. The hypnagogic state, the threshold between sleep and waking, is characterized by brainwave patterns that closely resemble those of deep meditation. A state of relaxed, open, deeply receptive consciousness in which suggestion and declaration travel directly to the subconscious without the usual filtering and resistance of the fully awake critical mind. Use this window. Use it deliberately. Use it with the understanding that what you plant in those first moments will color the entire day that follows. The practice is simple. In those first moments of waking, before anything else, you speak 3 things. You speak them quietly, inwardly if necessary, with genuine feeling rather than performance. The first is a declaration of identity, something true about who you are at the level of your divine nature rather than your current circumstances. I am an expression of infinite divine life. I am whole, and I am loved, and I am guided. I am a channel of divine good, and that good flows freely through me today. Find the words that feel genuinely true to you, that carry a real resonance in your body when you speak them. Not words you are trying to believe, but words that, when spoken, produce even a small, genuine warmth in your chest. That warmth is the feeling confirming the word. That warmth is the seed finding its soil. The second thing you speak in that morning window is a declaration of gratitude for something that is genuinely and specifically true right now. Not a general statement of gratitude performed as a ritual, but a specific, honest, felt acknowledgement of one real good thing in your present experience. I am grateful that my body carried me through another night. I am grateful for the relationship with my child that gave me one moment of real laughter yesterday. I am grateful that I have this day and the possibility it contains. Find the thing that is actually real and actually appreciated. The subconscious mind, as we have discussed, is a perfect emotional polygraph. It knows the difference between genuine appreciation and the performance of it. One genuine flicker of true gratitude sends a more powerful creative signal than an hour of performed positivity. The third thing you speak in that morning window is a declaration of invitation, an opening of the channel through which divine supply and divine guidance and divine right opportunity can flow into your day. The exact wording matters less than the genuine spirit of it. Something like, I open myself today to divine guidance. I am led to exactly the right people, the right opportunities, the right words, and the right actions. Everything I need finds its way to me with ease and with grace. Divine intelligence is ordering my steps today, and I trust the unfolding completely. Florence Scovel Shinn often spoke what she called the traveling prayer, a declaration she would speak before any journey, any meeting, any potentially challenging encounter, which essentially said that divine love goes before her and prepares the way, that every person she encounters is raised to their highest and best, that the outcome is perfect and harmonious and for the good of all. You can adapt this for any specific situation you are facing. Before a difficult conversation, before a job interview, before a financial meeting, before any encounter that your habitual mind wants to approach with anxiety, stop and speak the word first. Declare the divine right outcome. Declare that love and wisdom and perfect order are preceding you into the situation. And then walk in, as someone who believes that to be true. Throughout the day, the practice continues with what I want you to think of as the gentle patrol. You are not policing your every thought with anxious vigilance. You are not white-knuckling your way through the day, frantically monitoring every internal whisper for signs of negativity. That kind of effortful, tension-filled self-surveillance produces its own kind of exhaustion and its own kind of distorted results, because the very anxiety of the surveillance is itself a negative signal. The gentle patrol is something entirely different. It is the practice of a loving witness, of a part of you that is simply awake and aware, that notices with warmth and without judgment when the old language surfaces, and that gently, easily, without drama or self-criticism, redirects. Think of it as the way a skilled gardener tends a garden. Not frantically pulling out weeds the moment they appear, scanning the ground with terrified intensity, but moving through the garden with calm attentiveness, noticing what needs attention, addressing it with practiced ease, and moving on. The gardener does not berate themselves for the existence of weeds. They simply tend. They simply redirect. They simply keep turning the soil back toward the conditions that support growth. When you catch yourself speaking the old language, and you will, because this is a practice, and practice includes the full experience of being a student rather than an instant master, the response is simple and always the same. You pause, you take one genuine breath, and you gently rephrase, not with force, not with the desperate energy of someone trying to undo damage, but with the quiet confidence of someone who is learning a new language and who has simply caught themselves reaching for an old word when a better one is available. You say the new word. You feel even a small amount of the feeling that corresponds to it, and you move forward. That is the entire practice in that moment. Nothing more elaborate is required. Nothing more dramatic is needed. The consistency of the gentle redirection, accumulated over days and weeks and months, is what produces the transformation, not the perfection of any single day. Florence Scovel Shinn spoke often about what she called chemicalization. It was her word for the period of apparent chaos or intensification that sometimes precedes a major breakthrough. She had observed that when a person genuinely begins to shift their spoken word and their underlying beliefs, the old pattern sometimes seems to flare up before it dissolves. The financial situation may seem to get slightly worse just before it turns. The difficult relationship may seem to become more tense just before it heals. The health challenge may seem to intensify just before the body responds to the new declarations of wholeness. She taught that this was not a sign of failure. It was a sign of movement. It was the creative law stirring the old pattern, bringing it to the surface so that it could be released. Like sediment, disturbed at the bottom of a glass of water before it finally settles and the water becomes clear. If you understand this, if you recognize chemicalization for what it is when you encounter it, you will not make the mistake that undoes so many people at the threshold of their breakthrough. You will not look at the apparent intensification of the old problem and take it as proof that the new words are not working. You will look at it and recognize it as the death rattle of the old pattern, as the signal that you are closer to the breakthrough than you have ever been. And you will speak the word with greater conviction rather than abandoning it in the face of the temporary turbulence. I want to speak now about the evening practice, because the bookend of the day is every bit as important as the morning window. Just as the moments of waking offer a window of heightened subconscious receptivity, so do the moments just before sleep. In those final minutes, before you drift from waking consciousness into the deep waters of sleep, your subconscious mind will receive whatever you offer it, and process it through the entire night. The nervous system will organize around it. The creative faculty will work with it in the deep silence of those unconscious hours. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this, and she was very specific about what should and should not be offered in those precious final minutes. She would have said, "And I say to you with equal directness, that reviewing the day's troubles, rehearsing tomorrow's anxieties, replaying conversations that went wrong, and running through the mental checklist of everything that is still broken and unresolved is the most costly habit most people engage in. Costly, because it is being done in the very window of greatest subconscious receptivity. It is like handing the most powerful creative machinery available to you, a blueprint of everything you do not want, and asking it to work through the night. The alternative is not difficult. It requires no equipment, no special knowledge, no significant investment of time. It requires only the deliberate choice, made in the last 5 minutes before sleep, to hand the subconscious mind a different set of instructions. To speak, quietly and with genuine feeling, the truths you are claiming. To review not the day's problems, but the day's gifts, however small. The one moment that was genuinely good. The one thing that went right. The one small confirmation that the new pattern is beginning to take hold. To speak your claims for tomorrow and for the larger future you are building. I am guided and protected through the night. I awaken tomorrow refreshed and renewed and filled with clarity and creative energy. My supply is unfolding in perfect divine order. The right doors are opening. The right people are being drawn into my path. All is well in my world, all is well in my world, all is well in my world. Feel it as you speak it. Let the feeling settle into your body like warmth. Let it be the last thing you carry into sleep. And trust the creative intelligence that governs all things to do its work in the hours of your rest. Now I want to speak to you about something that Florence Scovel Shinn considered one of the most powerful and most underused creative tools available to a human soul. Something that goes beyond the daily practice of word and feeling and enters the territory of active spiritual declaration. She called it speaking the word for another. The practice of standing in prayer, in conscious creative declaration, on behalf of someone else. Of seeing the divine right outcome for another person and declaring it with the same confidence and the same genuine feeling you would bring to your own declarations. She taught that this practice carried a particular potency for 2 reasons. The first is that when we stand in this way for another person, we are operating from the highest frequency available to the human heart. The frequency of genuine love and genuine goodwill, and it is precisely this frequency that the creative law responds to with the greatest swiftness and the greatest generosity. The second reason is more subtle and more remarkable. When you hold the vision of divine wholeness for another person, when you speak their highest truth rather than reinforcing the limited story you have built about them, something happens in you. Your own vision begins to clear. Your own understanding of what is possible expands. You practice, on behalf of someone else, the very faith that you are still developing in relationship to your own life. And that practice strengthens the muscle for both. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn never simply prayed for herself. She prayed for everyone. She saw everyone, without exception, as a divine being, temporarily lost in the hypnosis of limitation. And she would speak the word for them. She would declare their freedom. She would hold the vision of their highest good with such clarity and such love that many of them felt it. Many of them reported shifts they could not explain. Not because Florence had some special power that you do not possess, but because she was using, with complete consistency and genuine love, the same power that lives in your mouth right now, the same power that has been yours since the moment you drew your first breath. The same power that you are just now, in this moment, beginning to fully remember. And this brings me to the final thing I want to say to you. The thing that I believe Florence Scovel Shinn most wanted every person she ever worked with to truly know and truly feel and truly carry with them as they walked back out into the world. She wanted them to know that this is not a technique being applied to a broken life. This is a remembering, a returning, a homecoming to the truth of what you have always been, and what you have always had access to. You are not a person who lacks power trying to acquire it. You are a being of immense creative power who temporarily forgot that the power was yours. You are not someone trying to become worthy of abundance. You are an expression of the infinite source of all abundance who has been operating under the mistaken belief that the source was outside of you and beyond your reach. You are not someone learning to speak a foreign language. You are someone remembering your mother tongue, the language you spoke before the world taught you its language of limitation, the language of creation, the language of divine identity and divine supply and divine sovereign choice. Every word you speak from this day forward is a choice, not a burden, not a performance, not one more exhausting thing you must do correctly or suffer the consequences. A choice. A free and sovereign and endlessly available choice to speak from the level of your divine nature rather than the level of your accumulated fear. To describe the world you are creating rather than the world you have been tolerating. To name yourself by your highest truth rather than your most recent struggle. Florence Scovel Shinn lived this teaching every day of her life. She practiced it in the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. She practiced it when things were flowing and when they were not. She practiced it not because she was perfect, but because she was convinced by evidence too consistent and too specific to dismiss that the law was real, that the power was real, that the words were real, and that every human being who sincerely engaged with this truth had access to the same creative freedom she had found. And now that conviction is being offered to you, not as a demand, not as a prescription, but as an invitation. An invitation to step into the experiment with the gentle, open curiosity of someone who suspects they have been given something extraordinary and wants to find out if it is really true. Approach it as Florence would have invited you to approach it, with sincerity rather than performance, with patience rather than urgency, with the willingness to begin exactly where you are, with the exact words that are genuinely available to you in this exact moment, and to trust that those words, spoken consistently and felt genuinely, are enough. They have always been enough. The law does not require your eloquence. It requires only your direction. The subconscious mind does not require your perfection. It requires only your instruction. And the infinite creative source that Florence Scovel Shinn spent her life pointing toward does not require your worthiness to be proven. It requires only your willingness to receive. So here is where we end, and here is where you begin. Tonight, before you sleep, speak 3 truths. Speak them quietly and mean them as much as you can. Speak them not as wishes, but as the first, gentle, deliberate instructions of a new creative direction. Find the words that are genuinely yours, the ones that carry even a small, real warmth when you speak them. And speak them. Tomorrow morning, in those first soft moments before the day rushes in, speak them again. Different words, perhaps, or the same ones. Words about who you are and what you have and what you are choosing. And the day after that, speak them again. Not because you are forcing a result. Not because you are trying to trick a universe into giving you what you want. But because you are a divine, creative being who has just remembered the language they were born to speak. And once you have remembered it, once you have truly felt it land in your body as truth, rather than hope, you will not want to speak any other way. You will not be able to, because you will have tasted the freedom of it, the lightness of it, the profound, quiet dignity of a soul who has stopped asking permission to be abundant and has simply begun declaring it, who has stopped explaining their limitations and has simply begun overturning them, one word at a time, one day at a time, one genuine feeling at a time. The universe has been listening to every word you have ever spoken. It is listening right now. It has never once judged what it heard. It has only, faithfully and perfectly and without a single exception, delivered what was ordered. And it will go right on listening, right on delivering, right on honoring every instruction you give it with the same impersonal, inexhaustible, breathtaking faithfulness it has always shown. The only thing that is changing today is the instruction. The only thing that is different from this moment forward is the word, your sacred, powerful, universe-shaping word. Florence Scovel Shinn called it a wand. She was right. It has always been a wand, and it has always been in your hand. Now you know how to use it. Now you remember what it is for. Speak. Speak your truth. Speak your vision. Speak the life that has been waiting patiently in the invisible, fully formed, fully ready, needing only the sound of your voice to call it home. It is time. The pen is yours. The ink is your voice. And every word from this moment forward is the beginning of the most extraordinary story you have ever told. The story of a soul who woke up, who remembered, who opened their mouth and changed everything.